what do you think about potential of, I can say, political federalization of European Union?
It's a really difficult question because none of us really quite know how that would work. I think that people's feelings are changing about that. Let me go back several steps, perhaps. When I'm a lawyer by training. I went to law school in Germany in the 80s, and European law was part of my field. And at the time, the choice seemed to be sort of a super federalism, a real supranational state like the United States of Europe, or to stay like it was. Yeah? And there were people in Germany and in France in particular who wanted that and said that's the thing we have to do. Then for a long time we had this union method, which is something that Merkel has, of course, argued for, which is a Europe of national governments that federalizes only as much as is necessary. So where has the debate changed? The debate has changed in the sense that people are now thinking, well, maybe more is necessary. Yeah? So this is not about ideology. It's about what is necessary so that it works, so that it functions. And there, of course, when you start unwrapping that has a lot of different aspects, from banking union to economic and budgetary oversight and so on. But there is also an important aspect of change now that has nothing to do with federalism, yeah, or with Europeanization, and that is the changes that are taking place or should take place on the national level. And what I mean by that is this: you don't have to federalize everything. You can also say, listen, dear nations, we think that your system encourages corruption. Yeah? We think that you don't have the kind of oversight, yeah, and accountability that some European countries have, and you would be better off if you did. Yeah? And why don't you change your national systems in a way so that in the end your citizens don't have to pay a doctor for the doctor to even see them, much less treat their very sick child. Yeah? So I think that is also something that people have to think about and are talking about, and I think that's very important. In other words, you could also say that a Europe where there are huge differences between the fairness, the participativeness, and the corruptness, yeah, of a political system is very susceptible to crisis, because the crisis is going to hit an unfair, corrupt system worse than one that is not as corrupt. Yeah? And so, in other words, we make the entire EU more safer and less prone to crisis if we make sure that national systems are fairer and are better governed. Sorry, it's a complicated theory, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of places like Bulgaria and Romania,
yes,
yeah, but also Italy.
Because
yeah.
Anyway,
and Greece.
A level of self-government is quite difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
To balance. And question about future. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can talk about main threats for European Union stability and, I can say, prosperity in near future.
You know, that's another difficult question. I don't think that there are really serious security threats, unless the Iranians decide to do something stupid and send over a rocket. Yeah, but that's the unlikely case. What I would worry about is the following: that Europe proves unable to resolve the economic crisis, proves unable to create the political reforms on the national level and on the EU level that are necessary to make us function as an actor in global affairs and in regional security and foreign policy. And then if individual nation states, for example, decide to go back on the achievements of the 2 decades after 1989, I mean, you can look at Hungary and say that that's already happening there. Yeah? You can look at the way that Russia has been gaining influence in Bulgaria and say, you know, that could be a case where we ought to worry, yeah, and start looking very closely. Yeah? But you can also, and I don't want to be smug about Western Europe in any way, you can also look at the amount of populism that there is in Western Europe, or the and anti-immigrant feeling, and say we need to be really careful about it. Look at the riots in Stockholm. Who thought that you'd see riots in Stockholm? A couple of years ago we had riots in London that were also about social inequality and about the, if you will, the failure of the social contract. Yeah? So none of us have any cause to be complacent and smug about, how great we are. We need to make sure that our own countries work. This is what Obama called nation building at home. Yeah? And to make sure that our social contracts work. And social contracts are important. I grew up in Germany in a time when we had growth, when we had prosperity. Our parents' generation remembered the war and how horrible it was, and everything was better than it had been. Yeah? And so there was a sense that, and we had strong unions, we had strong churches, and we had strong parties, and we were, there was a feeling that everything was great and it was always going to be that way. Yeah? And of course it wasn't going to be that way. Yeah, forever. In other words, you have to make sure that you protect achievements. Yeah? And that's something that we have to learn how to do. For a while, I think we thought mistakenly that we wouldn't have to.